It's two programs, one on Jewish law and one on Israel studies. The Helen Miller Institute provides a rich academic forum for students and faculty to explore the breadth and complexity of Israel and contemporary topics. Currently, the Institute houses an undergraduate fellowship of nearly 40 students and brings visiting faculty from Israeli and U.S. universities to teach and research at Berkeley, hosts the university's undergraduate minor in Israel Studies, which just started this year, and offers dozens of lectures and programs for the public and campus communities. In addition to this week's busy schedule, we have 2 more programs coming up next week. On March 10th, Coca-Cola, Black Panthers, and Phantom Jets, a book talk with historian Oz Frankel, exploring 1960s American cultural and political influences on Israel. And on March 12th, we'll host our 5th annual Levitsky Lecture on Israel and the Great Powers, this year examining Israel's complex relations with the United Nations, with international legal scholar Yuval Shani and visiting Professor Masoud Fekhi. We have many more programs coming up in April, including with leading Israeli journalist Nadav Eyal, and also with Israeli writers Maya Arad and Sarai Shavit. I will pass around some of these flyers. Take a look at the all events flyer for our full listing, and please also refer to our website, social media, and e-blasts for more information about upcoming programs and also for recordings of our past programs. All of our programs are enabled by philanthropic support, so we are grateful for community partnership and encourage you to support this important work. So now it's a little in and out, but hopefully you can hear me. I'm thrilled to welcome our speaker and moderator. Nissim Mizrachi is a full professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Tel Aviv University, and served as head of the department from 2013 to 2016. He holds a BA and an MA from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and he completed his PhD at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor under a Fulbright Foundation Award, and his postdoctoral studies at Harvard University. His research interests include the sociology of knowledge, medicine and culture, social boundaries, social identity and morality, liberalism, and the study of ethnicity and stigma. He is the author and co-author of 8 books, edited volumes, and special issues, as well as dozens of articles. Mizrachi has also published several articles in Hebrew and English proposing a new post-liberal outline for research and critique. And his new book, which we'll be discussing today, deals with the roots of the clash between the liberal progressive vision and the rooted grammar that characterizes most communities in Israel and around the world. I'm also excited to welcome Professor Ann Swidler to moderate today's conversation. Professor Swidler is a professor in the Graduate School of the Department of Sociology at UC Berkeley. She studies the interplay of culture and institutions. She asks how culture works, both how people use it and how it shapes social life. She's best known for her books, Talk of Love, and the co-authored works, Habits of the Heart and The Good Society, as well as her classic article, Culture in Action, Symbols and Strategies. Her newest book is A Fraught Embrace, The Romance and Reality of AIDS Altruism in Africa, and the 2024 edited volume, Challenging Modernity. Professor Swidler teaches sociology of culture, sociology of religion, and sociological theory. Her interests increasingly touch on political sociology, development, and sociology of science and medicine as well. So please join me in welcoming Nissim Mizrachi and Swidler for today's conversation.
So Nissim and I have known each other quite a long time, and nonetheless, it is still a kind of weird coincidence that he was visiting here at the Institute in the fall of 2016. And it happened that Claude and I had invited him to our house to watch the election. And if you remember, I think we all thought that he was going to see the first woman elected president in the history of the United States. And when Trump won, we were gobsmacked. I mean, I wouldn't even say just shocked. He was not shocked. Why was he not shocked? Because he had begun, I don't even know if studying is the right word, recognizing the kind of rage that could emerge on the right. And so the first thing we want to do to kick this off is, if the gods are willing, to show you the piece of video that he took when he himself was participating in some kind of liberal human rights demonstration, and there were counter demonstrators from the Likud Mizrachi faction.
יוסי בנין בן זונה, אתם הילדים שלו. על מה אנחנו מדברים? מדברים על מדינה אחת היהודית. הם הולכים לערבים להגיד להם שגם זה לא שלנו. מה נשאר? על מה נתמודד? איפה נחיה? איפה הם יחיו? יחזרו לאירופה, ישחטו אותם. כל אשכנזים והמניאקים האלה, יש לו 3 דקפונים. הוא לא רוצה את המדינה שיעזוב בכבוד. תשאירו לנו את השלטון, לכו בכבוד. לכו יא מזדיינים בתחת. מדינה אחת יש ליהודים. ספרו אתכם במשרפות. אתם לא רוצים ללמוד. אתם זונות בני זונות.
אתם יצאתם מהתאי גזים.
אתם רוצים לחזור. הערבים יזיינו אותך. אותך יזיינו הערבים. ישחטו אותך כמו לא יודע מה. יא זונה בת זונה.
אתם לא מבינים שום דבר. רק שהערבים יטפלו בכם, תתחילו לערבים. שהערבים יטפלו בכם, תתחילו לערבים את הערבים.
היטלר צדק! היטלר צדק!
היטלר!
היטלר צדק! היטלר צדק!
היי היטלר! היי היטלר יא זבל! יש לך!
אתה בא להגיד לי, אשכנזי לא נותן שנייה, אם אין לו אינטרס, הוא היה יצטרק של אש"ף, זונה בת זונה.
תראה את המרוקאי הזה, הנה, תראה את המרוקאי הזה.
היטלר צדק! היטלר צדק!
אתם בוגדים.
תחזרו לאירופה! לתנורים! היטלר צדק!
For those of you who don't speak Hebrew or who are too far away to read the subtitles, I can summarize. This person is saying, these people are saying, you're sons of bitches, you're garbage. Hitler was right. They should have burned you in the crematoria. Hitler was right. Hitler was right. They killed your ancestors and you won't learn. You are garbage. You are filth. You are sons of bitches. Yossi Bellin is a bastard and you are his bitches. This, I mean, just it's rage and it repeatedly, Hitler was right. Hitler was right. You should have burned in the crematoria. Now, I will now ask Nissim how he has tried to understand what's going on.
Go. Okay. Hi, good afternoon. Yeah.
Is this here?
This was 15 years ago. So it is before social media. And
Speaking right in the mic.
okay, it was 15 years ago, before social media. I was back then a member of the Israeli Organization of Human Rights Organization, ACRI. I was a elected board member. I did not attend this demonstration, but it was the Nevi'im Street. The demonstrators were marching toward the old city, the Eastern Jerusalem, to support Palestinians, and the protesters were kind of standing. I mean, this is a very regular scene. I mean, it's the intensity of the rage that we just witnessed is pretty rare, but I mean, this is kind of a generic episode in this kind of demonstrations. So
Hold the mic a little bit closer. People are having trouble hearing you.
okay, so
Excuse me.
so I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experience when I first returned to Israel after graduating, and I became involved in many NGOs. I was trained as medical sociologist, anthropologist, so it was not part of my research agenda at all. And
Yeah, you have to speak closer
Okay.
to the mic.
so it was not part of my research agenda. I didn't study human rights or inequality or diversity or ethnicity. But I became involved immediately when when I first arrived in a number of organizations. Some of them were Mizrachi organizations, leftist organizations, working kind of to promote social equality, freedom, education, and so on and so forth. The agenda was progressive, liberal progressive. And at the same time, I did my own academic stuff, and which I found, the interesting stuff. I studied the mind-body problem in medicine. I studied the American, the history of the American medicine. So it was far removed from my own activities, and I kind of operated in two parallel channels. One channel was about what's important. What's interesting? What's interesting was my academic work, and the other channel is what's important is to activism and to be involved in kind of a social repair, tikkun olam, and so on and so forth. And after a while, as you can see, I could kind of feel that, in a way, my agenda cannot reach the hearts and minds of the people I'm trying to elevate. I'm trying to empower. For some reason, I feel that there's kind of a consistent resistance, although they were very happy with me and with other activists, Mizrachi activists, and but they resisted the all package, the all kind of agenda, political agenda. So you are fine and stuff, but we don't buy. We don't buy it. We don't really want to cross the lines, and it was very, very. It was very tangible and real, and at a certain point, I thought, God, it's big. Why is that? And it's ACRI, the human rights organization I worked with. I asked question. Okay, we have this like universal message. Equality, human rights. What?
Hold this
Hold it, okay.
so you stay close.
Okay, so we have our agenda is universal, and there is a very troubling gap between the universality of the message and the social particularism of our camp, our social camp, and the opponents. But it never changed. They don't cross the line. We can't reach. It's like a wall. We can't reach their hearts and minds. So I ask why, and it's even more troubling when you think about this Mizrachi population. This is not the all Mizrahim, and I don't know if you know, but Mizrachi Jews from North African and Middle Eastern origin are the majority of Jews in Israel, the majority. I don't know if you know it. It kind of complicates all the scripts about settler colonialism, right? And now, so the majority of Jewish Israelis are Mizrahim. So we are talking specifically on Mizrahi Jews from the periphery, working class, who support right-wing parties, okay, and Likud. So the question is, okay, so we had this gap between universality and the particularity, but even more troubling is that because this group was defined as kind of disadvantaged and marginalized, we thought that they are the group that is more likely to benefit from liberal justice and human rights. So the paradox has become even more kind of evident, and I think it resonates with what here Thomas Frank called over 20 years ago, the great paradox. What's the matter with Texas? Why poor people vote for the right and reject the...
You have to lean forward.
Okay.
Every time your voice drops, I'm gonna interrupt. So.
Okay. So this was the question. So this kind of resistance, the resistance in reality to my ideals and ideas, at this point, if I had two channels, one is interesting and one is important, I think the important became interesting to me. I felt this is the place I need to, and this was kind of the turning point in my own research agenda. And I started studying liberalism, studying the conditions of possibility in the world of liberal ideas. So that was kind of the beginning of the journey.
And continue, then explain what you did and what you found.
Okay, so the first thing, to ask this when the important became interesting, I asked myself three simple questions. They're simple, but they're very challenging. How do I know that I'm right? Okay, that I'm right. Okay, to take this question seriously and to dig in here, it was not very simple. How do I know that? How do I know that they are wrong? It's not the same question. And the third question is, how do they know that they're right? What is their sense of justice and morality? And to learn, to really start looking at this question seriously, I need a research plan. I need to be aware of what I'm doing. So let's begin with the first one. How do I know that I'm right? Of course, I think it was not my study, it was not my topic, it was part of my research. But I was trained in America. All of my life, I was part of the of left-wing circles. I was not a politician, but it was very obvious and taken for granted to me that freedom and equality are, if we think about these principles, are the only authentic human choice. This is what everybody should people, it's self-evident. People, you offer them equality, you offer them freedom, they all take it. And they don't. Some of them not. You refuse to take it. So that was kind of the first place to stop and to start my thinking. Okay, I looked at my sociological disposal. What do I have in my disposal to explain this, paradox? And I found it, quite impoverished. Most of the explanations were, okay, this is an anomaly. It's a problem. It's a problem in the world, not in our theoretical toolkit. It's in the world. And when we look at their behavior, we have some, ready-made, explanations about, okay, Marxist explanations about class. They are in some sort of false consciousness. We're not clear about it. We don't take a full intellectual responsibility for this concept, but they are in false consciousness. Settler colonialism and also, all this discourse also offered they are kind of in a sort of a denial. They have some like identity problems with Arabs, and they want to purify their Jewish identity. It was always, all explanations were, their behavior was regarded as reactive. It's reactive, unlike our Jews. We don't. Our opinions are, of course, based on our rational choice. They're valid. We don't question it. We don't question. Social sciences in Israel never focused on why nice Ashkenazi liberal vote for the left or whatever, secular vote for the left. It was not a problem. This was an anomaly, a malady, waiting a cure, something that we need to. So that was kind of the toolkit I've had, and I was trying. So this is why they. How did I know that they were wrong? Yeah. So how did I know that how do they know that they're right? I needed to study them carefully. So the first thing that I did methodologically, and is to a little bit, to become a little bit more humble in my assumptions, right? To provincialize my own position, to think that my own position, the position of certainty, I need to a little bit lower it in order to open the space for a fuller reading of their own worries, their own grievances. See, these people were out in distress. I mean, it's clear. They behave like you just like set their home, the house on fire, and rape their daughters. I mean, this is like a real distress. So do we really can open the space and to show some empathy to their own position, to learn and to listen carefully to to show some curiosity and to train myself to really look and try to understand what's going on, take their own position, right? So that's what I did. In my study, in the book, I'm not going to get into the methodology I promised, but it was interesting because I was trying to consciously activate the illiberal subjects in the field, to make them active, to really make a special effort to listen to them and to voices, and I did it methodologically. I really turned them, just in a sentence, the study is based on a statistical survey that I did in the beginning about what people know, factual issues about inequality in Israel. And I just wanted to make sure that Arabs, all the entire population, that I wanted to make sure that all of them know there some kind of factual issues about inequality. They know that they are in a lower position. They were, that they were discriminated against. There was tracking system. I wanted to make sure that they know that. And then I had my data. I analyzed the statistical data, and then I turned the statistics into a text for them to interpret, not me. So this is kind of what I did in the studies. So in a way, they became analysts, interpreters, and critics of the data that they themselves had helped to produce. That was the methodology. And they were reading and they were correcting me every time I thought, there is like one finding that it's absolutely show that they were discriminated against. And here we are going to witness. And how did I do that? By focus groups. And they were like discussing the data together. And during this process, I was kind of, we were like, we couldn't breathe. We're looking at them and we were waiting for kind of moments of revelation, epiphany, a moment of consciousness raising. Okay, we got it, This is the state that kind of marginalizes us and we feel very no resentment against the state. Understand, yeah, there was inequality, wrongdoing, but we're still loyal to the state. Their fidelity to the state of Israel, to Zionism, to the Jewish story was unshakable. Unshakable. It had nothing to do with with inequality and with the fact that they were discriminated against, and they didn't view themselves as a minority group by no means. That this was for them a categorical error to put them in one line with Arabs and other minority groups, but we're not. We belong to this greater whole, which is the Jewish stuff, and that was, and you know, by doing this, I was I learned about kind of the alternative grammar, moral grammar that they have, and the alternative grammar was I called rootedness, and rootedness is the experience of being connected to a greater whole that, you know, was born in an imagined past, yeah, and we look at it as kind of a continuum, and we want to secure its boundaries for future generation, and it's very, very meaningful. We can think about ourselves, about what happened to us as autonomous individual, like, you know, this is not the lenses through which we will look at at inequality. So we can say, okay, there was some wrongdoing, but it was part of the process of nation building, and we are part of this process, and we participated in this process of nation building, and it's very deep and existential for us to become part of it, and this is rootedness. And I want to give you one example, and so one thing, this is what I did in the book, but before I wrote this book, I conducted a number of studies with illiberal communities, both Muslims and Jews. One of them was about meetings and a special forum, that a dialogue between Shas people, ultra-Orthodox Mizrahi Jews, and the Islamic movement, imams from the Islamic movement. And I wanted this study I conducted with my colleague Erika Weiss. She's an anthropologist trained in Princeton, and we followed them for 4 years. These two groups. And I remember the first episode when I first kind of encountered this forum, and I was invited to speak as an academic in this convent, which was quite bizarre, because there were all imams and rabbis speaking in a kind of religious language and microphone. So I entered like a room in Elad. It's a Haredi Yishuv, Haredi town, and it was crowded by imams and Shas people. A special space was allocated for women wearing wigs and hijabs. And there was a microphone in the middle of the dinner. And if it was not surreal enough, there was a guy from Norway with headphones, like the European Union or something. So, and they were like talking, you know, religious language and blah, 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 stories from the Bible, each of them, and clapping, you know, the more the rabbi important, the harder they clap and stuff. And then the most charismatic leader, like a politician from Shas, Aryeh Deri, entered the room, and he took the microphone, and he was started like talking about how great he was for Arabs, and it's true. He was very generous as a minister, and improved their living conditions and so on. And he started like listing, you know, cultural similarities between the two groups. He said, you know, we're alike. You know, we believe in God, they're clapping. We respect our parents, they're clapping. We respect our traditions, they're clapping. And so we have one more thing in common. We do not want to assimilate. Clapping. So what's going on? That was kind of a stark ethnographic moment. Why are they celebrating? At this moment of bonding and closeness, they're celebrating separation. And here I understood something about the powerful, the connective power of rootedness and meaning. Religious boundaries, I mean, need to be secured. They are an essential to, you know, defending these boundaries, securing these boundaries is an essential condition for these communities, both communities, for revealing their shared humanity. And this is quite the opposite from the progressive liberal mind, that we think that we need to remove social boundaries in order for, to allow, for allowing the autonomous individuals on both sides to, fulfill their own wishes and to be free and to realize their autonomy as individuals. They can cross borders and stuff. All collective boundaries are secondary. When you compare them, the sacred, the individual, autonomous individual is sacred, and collective boundaries are secondary.
I'm just going to jump in and say one word, which is the word inclusive. I think if you looked at the web page of every non-ultra or non-Chabad, I don't know what Chabad does, you would find that word inclusive. We are an inclusive community. And you're talking about a communities with boundaries. Okay.
Yeah, and boundaries are essential. And once you threaten these boundaries, people feel like it's an existential threat to their core identity, right? To their core identity. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I need to swallow the microphone.
Just
That's
Yeah.
basically eat
Yeah.
swallow it.
it and move it and get back to us.
Left.
Now jump to the.
Sorry.
You can also hold the mic.
Oh.
Hold the mic. Yeah,
Oh.
that works.
Oh, that's
Okay.
good. When you say that. Okay, great. So, yes, so that was, so rootedness, but rootedness is kind of too generic because when you think about it, most of us are rooted in some way. So, we belong to a greater whole and in some way, but I think it has, if you look, just to complicate the picture, if we look at the composition of the Jewish populations in Israel, we can see that most of them are rooted. They feel like the lived experience is that, they are connected. But if you look at the components of the rootedness, we can find some significant differences. For example, think about the protesters against the legislation that there's a constitutional, during the constitutional crisis, right? So they were marching with flags, So they acted as a collective community, the community with kind of some collective symbols, and they are collective and they are connected to the whole. But if you compare them to, so what is, how can we describe their unrootedness? So here I use a number of components that need to build that. One of them is the first three are based on Shmuel Eisenstadt, a famous sociologist who was my teacher just during his last days, I think. And I think Anna knows him, and it's Eric. He talked about collective codes. So we have three codes in modernity that defines the border between them and us and them. Like imagine us and them, right? One of them is the civic code. It's our belonging to political community, statehood. I'm French, he's Belgium. This is the way we define. The other one is the primordial. It's kind of it's more about blood and kinship. So for us as liberal progressive, it's hard to imagine. We don't want to think about it because probably it has some racist connotations. But we all care about our kids more than we care about other kids. So we do understand that it has some presence in our lives. Okay. The third one is transcendental. What are the underlying justifications of the border? God or universal reason? Okay. Now I added two other components, which is the time, the sense of history. When we look at when this great imagined whole was born, in the mythical time, or in the Zionist time, national. So if you think about Orthodox Haredi Ashkenazim, Of course, they are rooted. This is close rootedness. Their sense of time and history, of course, only the mythical time is valid. I mean, the Zionism was a kind of a historical accident. The civic code is some nonsense we bore from the Goyim of the democracy, institutions, okay, blah, blah, blah. Of course, the only sacred thing is the Torah and God and so on and so forth. On the other hand, if you go back to the protesters, so the civic code is sacred for them, and the threat on this code, the attack on the Supreme Court was kind of posed an existential threat to the core identity. They could not imagine their life without this kind of civic democratic space that they're trying to protect. This is the only kind of worthy life, collective life, and they felt that they need to protect their identity. This is the reason the crisis was existential. It's about identity crisis, and it's about trust on the other people. So if you look at the Mizrachi protesters, and also the settlers, the religious Zionists, you think that they are pretty much like living in between codes, and they move between codes. They're both, the mythical code is very important. Also, the Zionist code, God is of course important, but also universal reason. They play. They are part of the democratic game as legitimate players. So they really acknowledge this civic space and so on and so forth. But there is one fundamental difference between these two groups. The settlers and the National Zionists, their project is to fuse to fuse together the mythical time and the Zionist time together in order to redefine the political center. So I call it this utopian rootedness, while Mizrahim are very pragmatic and they don't have this kind of ideological Mizrahim right-wing Likud supporters. They don't have this ideological vision at all. Okay, so this is kind of in a way an anatomy of very very briefly of the identity camps in Israel.
Now I'm going to force him to stop talking about this and to start talking about Tiebreaker, this remarkable, amazing project he's been part of. I think basically he initiated, I'm going to say, and you can tell us about it. And then there are a couple more short videos, and we promise to stop before 1:30. So there's plenty of time for questions.
Okay, thanks, Al. So during the constitutional crisis, Israel was on the verge of civic war. I mean, it was really, really, it was serious. People kind of forgot it, tend to forget it because, after the October the 7th, we had this external enemy that reminded us that there is, we're still kind of having a real existential challenge here. And but during the constitutional crisis, there was the process of deepening. There was a deepening conflict and between the two identity camps, and I think that what happened here, because of the severe threat that the liberal secular kind of experience, they embrace a very, very extreme vision about themselves, about what's going on. All the other people, the coalition and the government was composed of the unfit people. What is the unfit people? If their rootedness was based on the Zionist time and kind of the secular reason and the civic code, we need to remember that at Zionist time, Zionism was not only a political project, it was an identity project to create the new Jew, secular, rational, suited to liberal democracy and economy. And if you look at the government today, the government is composed of the unfits. All of them are unfits of the project. It's like we're talking about Haredi, settlers, and populists from the Likud, that they don't fit the model. So we can trust them. We can give them any credit, and vice versa. So the people from the coalition and Likud people viewed these protesters as like a real threat on their Jewishness. They want to take their, they threat on their identity. So in this kind of deepening polarizations, people tend to embrace and to hold into simplistic, extreme stories about good and bad, yeah, and to give what I call zero moral credit to people on the other camp. What is moral credit? Moral credit is a term of my colleague Adam Seligman. Is it to give the benefit of the doubt? But I use it in a broader meaning. That you, when you give moral credit to someone who is morally different than you, who belong to the other camp, you assume that he or she or they are good people. You're not questioning. You don't question their motives. You don't feel that they're evil, and you even accept their leadership if you do that. Yeah. Now, we give moral credit to other people in the workplace and different social spheres. Yeah, we can give them the key to our office. They're fine people, but in a state of depolarization and in the political discourse, the moral credit drops to zero to these people. So we're not willing to listening to that. So it has like a tremendous effect on our ability, first of all, to listen, to show some empathy, to show some curiosity, and to assume that maybe there is also some truth in what they're saying, and maybe there is some value, in their position, for me, in what they say and about and their vision. So this is it drops to zero. So many people during the constitutional crisis felt that they need to step outside their echo chamber and outside of their moral community and to meet people. They felt there was a very big and troubling gap between their own understanding of what's going on, that there are reasonable people on the other side, and the discourse and the political discourse. And of course, the social media helped to exacerbate the picture and to further simplify the stories. So I was invited to many of these forums and group dialogue, and I realized after attending a number of them, there is one big significant group missing: Likud supporters. All and Ronen Avraham gave a talk yesterday about the fourth quarter. And I think the fourth quarter is also, they were looking for Likud people. And it was really hard to get them. Most participants on both sides were kind of decent people sharing civic codes, settlers and people from Kaplan, from the central left. And nice, polite, middle class, discuss issues, write documents. But where are the BBists? The Bibis, and they are the populists. It's like it's rhymes, it's not perfect rhyme, but people talk Bibist, and they are this kind of populist, the biggest electorate on the right, and it's a game changer. Once you really negotiate and include them, you can really stabilize democracy. So the discourse during the crisis and even today about the future of Israel, of democracy in Israel, focus primarily on institutional issues, to secure the position of the Supreme Court. Constitutional issues, legislation, the separation of powers and all this, and the right legislation. But I think what's missing from the discourse is the demos, the people. We're talking about constitutions, institutions, but where is the demos? Where is the Likud demos? Demos and where is the discourse about democracy's culture? Not only about procedures or institutions. Culture meaning a living faith, living faith, and that should reach out to people, to their hearts and minds, and include them in the process, in the cultural process of democracy. And so I thought, we need to look for and to reach out to the Likud demos. So I decided that Van Leer and heading themes called the challenge of shared life or living together. I said, okay, we should bring Likud people here. I want to hear them. I want to hear their voice. We need to have a real dialogue with them. And I talked to my friend, a journalist, Mazal Mualem, and I told her she's an expert on Likud. She wrote a book on Netanyahu, an important book. And I told her, Mazal, I want the real thing. The real thing, the real populists. No, they're not nice people. I don't want like nice people from Likud that are, easy to handle. No, it's the real people.
Can you use that term? Can you use the term you used?
Poison machine?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want the poison machines. Poison machines. This is like mechonat ral in Hebrew. And these are the people who are considered to be like the most dangerous players in social media. And so she said, I got one, and he's smart and sharp. And so we invited him, and there was a panel with Mazal, and his name is Moti Ohana, and there was also my student who studied Mizrahim and Arabs in the market in Ramle, and another right-wing journalist. And the crowd was liberal, progressive, Van Leer people. And a friend of mine who was very active in the fourth quarter, a professor, neuroscientist from Tel Aviv University, was talking to me for a while by then about how worried he is, and he's like he and his friend are demonstrating in Kaplan and blah blah blah. He said, "Yeah, it's very interesting what you're saying.
Talk louder. Talk
It's
louder.
very interesting what you're saying, and I read your stuff and stuff, but I really want to do something, real, political." They said, "Okay, you should come to Van Leer's meeting," and he came. And that was the first time my professor, my friend, met with Moti Ohana, the poison machine. And it was great. I mean, the meeting was great, the panel was great. People said to me that it was the best panel they've had for years, the Van Leer. They learned a lot. The Likud people and the poison machine had a voice of reason. He was very reasoned. The arguments were reasoned. And he could explain why they vote for Netanyahu and why it's not democratic to tell them that they shouldn't vote, and this is the only condition the necessary condition for them to participate in dialogue. They tell us who is not democratic here, what is democracy, so we established a new forum, and I felt that for the first time I'm in the exact place. It was so precise to me. Also as a sociologist, but also as a Mizrahi scholar, you could really feel like a cultural broker there. And so other professors, joined our side, and they brought other Likud people. And the president of our university, Ariel Porat, who is kind of the leading figure in academia against the legislation and the government, participated. We had we are together in about a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nissim, I'm going to interrupt because we have 5 minutes to show the tape.
Yeah, so
Okay.
just say that we launched our event in the Knesset with the speaker, Amir Ohana, with, our president, Tel Aviv University came to this event and talked. Knesset members from both sides, coalition and opposition, came, and it was moving. We had a very nice panel on TV. And we keep rolling, and okay.
Show the video and then you can discuss.
Yeah. Okay, so the first video
Wait.
is, okay, this is from the Knesset. This is Moti Ohana. This is the poison machine. By the way, and the first one, he's talking about, in this video, he's talking about his view of their identity, the identity of the Bibists.
הזהות שלנו היא לא ליברלית, אנחנו לא שמרנים, ואנחנו לא ליברלים ולא שמרנים. כדי להבין, אני חושב, את הבסיס של הליכוד, את הלב של הליכוד, אתם צריכים להבין שאנחנו קודם כל מרגישים, לא אומר שאתם לא, אבל אנחנו מרגישים שאנחנו קודם כל יהודים. מזה אנחנו מתחילים את הכל. היהדות זה הדבר הכי חשוב לנו. לפני שאנחנו ישראלים, לפני שאנחנו דמוקרטים, לפני שאנחנו הכל. אבל יש לנו כל מיני סוגי יהדות. היהדות שלי זה לעשות קידוש בשבת וללכת להדליק טלוויזיה. פעם הייתי מעשן, היום כבר לא. והיהדות של אשתי זה להיות בבית כנסת קונסרבטיבי. אז כל אחד יש לו את היהדות שלו, אבל זה הדבר הכי חשוב לנו. זה הבסיס שאנחנו מחנכים את הילדים שלנו. ובמידה רבה ראינו, בכמה קטעים שהיו, שזה הדבר שהכי הרג אותנו, זה שראינו שכאילו רוצים לגנוב לנו את היהדות. את היהדות שלנו. עכשיו היהדות שלנו היא, כמו שניסי פרופסור מזרחי קורא לה, היא חילונית אורתודוקסית. אנחנו מכבדים רבנים, אנחנו גדלנו על לכבד רבנים, אנחנו גדלנו על לכבד את לומדי התורה. עזבו עכשיו רגע, אלה שצריכים להתגייס, לא להתגייס, ברור שאנחנו רוצים שמי שלא לומד תורה שיתגייס, בדיוק מהילדים שלנו. אבל על זה גדלנו. אנחנו לא יכולים להתנהג אחרת לרבנים, גם אם אנחנו חילונים. ועד שהצד השני לא יבין את זה, אז הוא לא יבין את ההתנהגות שלנו, או את היחס שלנו לדת. היחס שלנו לדת הוא יחס של כבוד. כשאנחנו רואים מישהו מנשק יד של רב, זה לא איזה גנאי בשבילנו. אנחנו מכבדים את זה. חלק מאיתנו יעשה את זה, חלק לא. אבל אנחנו מכבדים את זה. אוקיי, אז אני אומר, הזהות שלנו היא גם דתית, המסורת. מה זה המסורת שלנו? מה אנחנו רואים מעצמנו? מבחינתנו באנו לפה, הסבא רבא שלי בא ב-1865 ממרוקו, כדי שאני אשאר פה, כדי שאני גדל ילדים פה, והילדים שלי ימשיכו לגדול פה, ויחיו עם כולם, ויגיעו גם לאוניברסיטאות, ויגיעו לכל מקום שכל אחד רוצה שהילדים שלו יגיעו. אבל המסורת היהודית מאוד חשובה לנו, אי אפשר לנתק אותה מאיתנו. כלומר, אי אפשר לקחת את הדת ולהגיד לליכודניקים, אתם לא יכולים להיות מסורתיים. אתם כאילו ביביסטים כאלה, רק מה שאומרים לכם אתם עושים. מה נראה לכם? שאם נגיד נתניהו מחר בבוקר היה קם ונותן נאום והיה אומר, אוקיי, אני מתנגד לתפילה מעורבת. אז אתם חושבים שהוא נשאר יו"ר הליכוד?
הוא היה עף למחרת.
הוא לא היה יו"ר הליכוד. אתם חושבים, אנשים כל הזמן חושבים שכביכול אנחנו משרתים את נתניהו במרכאות. אני אומר לכם בדיוק הפוך. נתניהו משרת אותנו, הוא משרת את הממלכתיות שלנו, הוא משרת את הגישה שלנו למסורת, הוא משרת את הגישה שלנו לדת, וזה לא רלוונטי בכלל אם הוא אוכל שרצים או לא. אני לא נכנס לאף בית ולא מעניין אותי מה אף אחד אוכל. לא בצד שלי ובטח לא בצד שלכם. אבל אנחנו מבחינתנו, מה שאתם קוראים ביביזם במרכאות, זה את מה שאנחנו רואים שנתניהו בשבילנו מייצג אותנו הכי טוב שאפשר בעולם נכון להיום.
Okay, so when we first met, I said, what's the difference between the two groups? What do you think? So the Likud people said, you mean Judaism. So our people in our group said, what? What are you taking our Judaism? We are also Jews. We care about tradition. We light the candles on Shabbat. And why are you saying this? And I helped them because they couldn't articulate their position. But I studied them and I said, they have a deep respect to Orthodoxy. Although they are not, it's a precarious religious. And they need, the rabbis need to be rabbis. Real rabbis like that. Yeah. And we have a great respect for that. And in our camp, these rabbis, some of the Orthodox rabbis, are very repugnant to other. And this is like a source of tension in the two groups. Okay.
Now, Nissim, I think we have to stop. And I can't remember what's in the last video. If it's
The next video is about Monty is talking in kind of a reflective populist about how you view us as populists, but we populists look at you back. So this was the next one. And the third one is from our TV panel that I participated in, where we see how Monty is given more credit to us. So these are like two videos. So.
Yeah.
אז כמו שמזל אמרה, שמי מוטי אוחנה, אני יליד טבריה, אחרי כמה שנים באתי לאוניברסיטה העברית, למדתי מכינה, סיימתי תואר ראשון באוניברסיטה העברית, ומאז שאני זוכר את עצמי, פחות איזה נקודה קטנה שיערה גילתה עליי, אני בליכוד כל השנים. ואני יושב פה, אולי אני מדבר פה לפני, לכל המפגש הזה, אז אפשר לתייג אותי כתור ביביסט לצורך העניין. אוקיי? ותכף נדבר מה זה ביביסט, אבל בעיקרון את כל הקבוצה שלי, זו קבוצה לא הקבוצה שלי, הקבוצה של הליכודניקים שפה, המסגרת שלה הייתה שאנחנו קבוצה של ביביסטים. והמהות של הביביסטים זה לפחות כפי שאנחנו תופסים את זה, שאחרים תופסים את זה, שכל המטרה של הרעיון הזה זה רק להשפיל אותנו. זאת אומרת להגיד, שמע, מה זה ביביסט? ביביסט זה מישהו שהוא, איך אני אגיד בסביבות החבר'ה, קצת אהבל, הוא לא יודע כלום, הוא קם בבוקר, פותח את הטלפון, מקבל את המסרונים של לשכת ראש הממשלה, ואחרי שהוא קורא אותם, הוא מתחיל לדקלם אותם. אז כמובן שזה הבל הבלים, וכמובן שזה לא קשור לכלום. אבל חוץ מזה שאני ביביסט, אני יכול להגיד לכם שהייתי לפני שנה הייתי אפילו מכונת הרעל, כן? שהייתה הייתי איזה מכונת רעל בטוויטר, ובזכות הפרופסורים אחרי שנה הפכתי לבורי קטן במכונה. אבל קודם הייתי אחד שמניע את הגלגלים כמו שצריך. אז הם כל פעם הם ייתנו אותי עוד קצת עד שהגענו להבשלה.
So we're open for questions, and I guess I won't keep a list, but I'll try to swing from one side to the other. So if people put hands up.
Yes, I'm happy to help with the queue, but
Okay.
repeat questions if you can.
Yes, okay. I we'll try to repeat questions. So, yes.
Thank you very much. I found this fascinating. I have a question about something you said before you began with Eisenstadt. Although on Eisenstadt, I want to ask, you said that you added 2 more points to his 3. I got the 4th one of time and history. I didn't hear the 5th one.
No, it's two types of, temporalities of time: the Zionist time and the mythical time. So
Thank you. Okay. But the question then has to do with how these people understand themselves vis-a-vis the state and the history. You said that they didn't perceive themselves as to any extent alienated from the state. And I'm thinking, what about the Black Panthers? What about Yehuda Shinav's work on Iraqis and other critiques of that sort? This just has gone past them. It was a moment in time, and that's the end.
I'm going to repeat the question. I can.
And you can give the 3 each,
Oh, don't.
if you want.
Yeah. All right. I would repeat the question just very briefly, saying you said that when you talk to these Mizrahim about how they've been discriminated against, they nonetheless totally identified with the state. But where does that leave the more radical critiques like the Black Panthers and Yehuda Shinav's work and so forth? Maybe I will take another question. You.
So you talked earlier about how you had these like preconceived ideals about like equality and freedom being like the fundamental values to society that they thought like almost everyone really could agree upon. Then you're talking about how through like your talks with a lot of Likud people, their fundamental values, like you said in the video, is about Judaism and that connection, that being the fundamental value of the state. How can you bridge the gap between those 2 ideals when to create a society that isn't so divided? People are pushed to such extremes.
Right.
Okay.
The opposite idea.
If I could repeat that question, which is a very tough one, how would Nissim try to reconcile the fundamental commitment to freedom and equality with the commitment to a boundary around the core of Judaism as the essence of the state?
Okay, great questions. So paradoxical reaction to this principle if you misrecognize the fundamental need for belonging of people. And belonging is belonging not as like an atom in the world, in the open space. Belonging is to belonging to a place with some borders, some boundaries. So back to your question. The one thing that really kind of made our many of our group members in the faculty at Aviv University and others, they felt like comfortable and relaxed, and they didn't want to go to Kaplan anymore. That they really got a very strong sense that these people are Democrats. They're Democrats. They really care about the Jewish state, but within this state, for example, principles of equality are sacred for all the Promotio Chana. And it's regarding Arabs and minorities, if they are citizens of Israel. Of course, we have like this challenge in Israel that, you do not share it here or in Europe, that we have like a minority group, unassimilated minority group that is identified with the external active enemy, which is like, it's very challenging. See what's going on in Europa, what's happening in Europa in Europe when you have like immigrants from Turkey. When you have immigrants from Turkey in Europe, you see that, the rise of, right-wing parties and so on and so forth. So Israel is really dealing with a serious challenge, but they're part of, they're partners. They're democratic partners, legitimate. And this is kind of the news for us. Not for us, not for me, but...
I want to also just quickly say something about what's in the video that are technical things I don't think we're going to see, which is that the liberal academics basically were finally able to say to these poison machine Likudniks, what would be like the MAGA Republicans, that distinction, you frighten us. We're afraid of you. And apparently, during these sessions, people cried on both sides.
Both sides.
Because they really were able to express how fearful the other side made them, and the other side was able to understand that they felt something, So I think that's another, this fear of the belief that the other side actually really wants to destroy you. And getting past that was incredibly important. That is not agreeing on everything. So I don't know if reconcile is a possibility in the world that Nissim is constructing there. Disagreeing, but not being so afraid that you literally are in tears because you are afraid, and instead in tears of some kind of sympathy or empathy. Okay, sorry.
Most of that are white.
I have a question about American Jews and their rootedness. So where does the rootedness of American Jews lie when their allegiance isn't strongly tied to the Jewish primordial whole and not even anchored in the civic temporality of 1948, but instead seems to rest on like liberal values, which we often equate with Jewish values. And unlike in Israel, where Tel Aviv's liberal Zionists are still rooted in the civic framework, American Jews distance themselves from the state often, and also from those Jews over there that make up Israel. But they're still obviously Jewish, but they reject civic and primordial rootedness. So is it possible to be rooted in an ideology like liberalism? And where does American Jewish rootedness ultimately belong?
Wow, another good question.
This is a question about where American Jewish rootedness could belong, given that so much of American Judaism embraces liberal values as core to what being Jewish means.
Yeah. So, ideally, I think that the mainstream critical discourse in academia is discourse about rootlessness. It's rootless. Yeah. Any kind of like connotation of some sort of rootedness is, and I think it's in a way got some doubts or maybe suspicion, right? It's not. Like you can't be you say that, okay, I'm national, I'm good, all the good things about, equality, gender equality, race, race, and all the lists, LGBTQ plus. I'm fine with it, and I'm proud to be American, and I'm blah blah blah. You can't say that. I mean, rootedness is in a way, in some ways, I think limits the notion of autonomy. And now, if there are of course communities, liberal progressive communities, they are no less embedded, socially embedded. This is the community. The ethos of the community is like rootlessness, right? But it's still a community. So I don't know if it answers your question but about American Jews, you should tell me. I want to learn more about it. How it is related to what I'm to my diagnosis.
Yeah.
I've been doing work on perpetuation of competing narratives.
Okay.
And much to be said, but I really appreciate so much you've laid out for us. I'm just wondering if there's a potential in your mind for rootedness in both the self-selecting subset and the spectrum engagement. My group and the democracy, bonding and bridging. Is there a potential for rootedness, Americans and Israelis and Palestinians, others, in my rootedness and rootedness in the collective?
I'm not sure I can repeat the question exactly. Is there a potential for rootedness in both?
In my group and in the totality of the mutually connected democracy?
In both my group and in the totality in a mutually connected democracy.
Right. It's a matter of like levels of loyalty, right? Levels of loyalty. If you feel like that you share faith with one group and you really care about it, and the other group is like just a background or a framework for living your life. Like if citizenship is like kind of a thin identity, and the thick identity is your community. So I think it needs to be explored, the meaning of it. I don't really, but if I understood your question, you're talking about rootedness within kind of a broader, right?
Can I simultaneously, I'm asking, is there a potential for a person to simultaneously feel rootedness in their group, which is essential, bonding, and coming to understand a rootedness in the democratic pluralistic society that we're all part of?
I think
is there a next step? This realization of tiers of fear, I understand. Can that move beyond that to a conversation in which we find how we're both self and collective?
Yeah. Okay. So think about the Islamic movement and Shas. They both like the sharing of the same kind of political space, and think they're willing to feel like connected to this space, and they're still very deeply rooted in their own communities. So I don't know.
Yeah, Karen.
I'm curious about the methodology used for the study you had done about the political thinking or social thinking of Mizrahim. So I have a number of questions about that. The Mizrahim are a huge part of the Israeli population and very diverse. So the people whom you either interviewed or questioned with questionnaires, were they from one particular ethnic group of Mizrahim, or do they include multiple groups?
Definitely multiple.
Wait. I have to repeat the question for that.
Yeah, that's one question.
Yeah, okay, then let me repeat that one. Okay, the first part of the question is when Nissim did his studies of Mizrahi Jews, were they from all the different ethnic and class backgrounds of Mizrahim or one particular group?
And gender and age.
Highly educated Arabs, working class Arab Muslims, highly educated Mizrahim, working class Mizrahim, highly educated Ashkenazim, working class Mizrahim, all like subgroups of all this kind of a representative sample. So they were all part of the the study, and there were like significant differences between, and all genders, of course, genders,
So men and
women, yeah.
Okay, but with I'm interested about the Mizrahim.
Yeah.
So did you differentiate whether they were new Olim or what generation, and whether their ancestry was Moroccan or Iran or Iraq, something like that?
So also the country of origin and the period of immigration of the Mizrahim.
The culture of origin was not the focus of the study, because we have some sociological assumptions why the Mizrahi experience kind of many groups share it, like, you know, despite their difference in their origin, but they're not the same. Definitely, Iraqi Jews are not the same as Moroccan, and you're right that they're everywhere, all of the political spectrum, from, you know, the radical left to the radical right, and so I mean, I think you should look at the book, and I answer more specific questions.
Okay, there.
I was very interested by the comment that you relayed about the like not wanting to assimilate piece, and I think there's a world in which, right, you have these smaller groups where the group identity is really important and they don't want to assimilate, they want to be left alone. I think what we're increasingly seeing, certainly in the US, is a desire of those groups to then not just not assimilate, but then to impose their values externally through legislation, through the courts, various different ways. How do we tackle that when it's not just wanting to be left alone, but wanting to exert power externally?
Okay, and the question is about this idea that there are groups that don't want to assimilate to the broader culture, but at least in the US case, also might want to impose their values and their culture on others outside their group. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, you know, one way to deal with it is, you know, by democracy. And then if you have a democratic culture, not only procedures, democratic cultures, and real dialogue between groups, and they all aware of the need to create together kind of the foundation for shared life. So they negotiate it. If not, there is some procedures and democratic procedures to basically to by which they can, you know, things can be determined. But I think I prefer to I think we all need here in the United States and Israel, we need to develop cultural resources for democracy, for democratic life. And the cultural resources that we're missing are essential for stabilizing our kind of democratic shared life or frameworks.
More questions, students, sir.
Go ahead. I didn't see.
Oh, no, skip me. Like, grab students.
No, but you point to the right person. That was okay.
Ship.
Hi.
Sorry.
He knows everything about Israel, so.
So I'm from the political science here, and obviously I focus on like political demography, especially the voting trends of immigrant communities. And in American immigrant communities, specifically in Staten Island and New Jersey, we have groups that we categorize as on the peripheries of whiteness. So like kind of white, but not really the same. Like Italian, like more Italian immigrants, Jews, and Jews are an exception to this, but we see, and we're also seeing this now with Hispanics, that a lot of these groups on the peripheries, they tend to gravitate towards a similar right-wing nationalistic project. Like President Trump, he won all these like 97, 98% Hispanic areas. I was wondering, in the Israeli context, is there a similar trend of like those, especially who are recently, and this kind of goes to your question, recently, is there a difference in their voting patterns, their outlook towards politics versus the descendants of those Mizrahim?
Okay, and the question has to do with groups that are almost at the edge of assimilating, but not quite in the US. On the margin of whiteness was the term the questioner used, who have at least the potential to become very right-wing. So asking whether in the Israeli case, the more recently arrived immigrant groups sometimes became more right-wing. I hope that's the.
Well, yeah. So thank you. I don't know how to answer this question because I don't have like any kind of empirical data. But I think the group I can think of was Russians in Israel, because I know we don't have like new Mizrahi immigrants. We have new French immigrants, North African, which is really interesting. By the way, if you want to see like to learn rootedness, they all grew up in France. They came to Israel, well educated, wealthy. They buy half of the hottest real estate in Tel Aviv and in other spots, and they're all extreme right wing. No oppression, no exclusion by the state, nothing. And it's very interesting because the French North African Jews are divided into those who were assimilated in French society, Claude Lelouch and all these cultural figures and stuff. So they become like, of course, French, and they have nothing to do with Israel. But those who kind of maintain their Jewishness, they are almost all of them are right wing settlers. Ben-Gvir, not only they are educated and wealthy. It's not about discrimination and exclusion.
Okay, and I think there's a chance for one last question of the person who already had a hand up.
I have no
you?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So I'm interested in this concept of, tiers of rootedness and identity that you mentioned, and the ability to be both rooted in your identity, but also be able to be affiliated with the state and the institutions of the state. And I'm thinking about right of return for Palestinians. And that's always seemed like that would be a threat to a Jewish state. But I'm wondering if there were right of return and there was an ability to have the sense of rootedness and affiliation with the state as a Jewish state, could that support right of return? So that people would basically be agreeing to return to a Jewish state and be able to be rooted, but also have a
Palestinians?
Yeah, like this concept of being.
I'm going to repeat the question, which is it possible that Palestinians who want the right of return could be both rooted, I assume, in their Palestinian sense of rootedness, but also fully accept that they were part of a Jewish state?
That's interesting. We need to really learn more about what it means to be rooted Palestinian, because it's a different nationality, and right now today it's identified with the external active enemy. So I'm not sure how it can work, but I don't know. I think the very notion of return to the Palestinians, kind of the average Jewish Israeli mindset is like a real threat to the very existence of Israel. So it's hard for me to imagine.
Yeah, me too. But
Okay, and I'll just say thank you, Rebecca, for hosting and making this possible, for inviting Nissim.